Sometimes a man reaches a point where life has taken so much from him that even a broken place feels like a second chance. That was how Dean Halpin felt the first day he walked up the weed-choked driveway toward the abandoned farmhouse he had won in a raffle he never expected to win. The old house stood crooked and tired, like it had been waiting years for someone to open its doors again. Dean pushed inside, and dust lifted into the air like memories waking from sleep. Chairs still sat where someone once left them, cups remained on counters, and the whole place felt frozen in another life. But Dean wasn't looking for history, he was looking for a reason to feel alive again. He had lost his job, his savings were almost gone, and his daughter barely spoke to him anymore. This farm was supposed to be useless, just a joke prize. But when he knocked on one of the kitchen walls and heard a hollow sound, something inside him shifted. He pulled away a loose board and found a thick, leather-bound journal hidden inside. The handwriting on the first page was careful and old-fashioned. March 15, 1995. Today I begin work that may change everything. The journal belonged to a man named Virgil Caswick, the previous owner the town whispered about. As Dean read deeper, the empty farmhouse felt less like a punishment and more like a doorway into another man's lonely genius, a doorway into a mystery that would pull him into a fight far bigger than he ever imagined. Dean spent the next morning exploring the house with slow, cautious steps. As sunlight pushed through dusty windows, he walked room to room, imagining the life Virgil once lived here, the long nights, the drawings scattered across tables, the quiet meals eaten alone. The journal became Dean's map. Each entry revealed a little more about Virgil, a man mocked by the town, ignored by the academic world, but determined to build something he called the converter. Dean didn't fully understand the drawings, the math, or the science, but he understood struggle. He understood being overlooked. And the more he read, the more he felt a strange connection to this stranger who had worked his whole life in silence. Over the next days, Dean cleaned the house, repaired broken boards, washed away years of dirt, and the place slowly began to feel less abandoned. But the biggest discovery came when he entered the barn. Behind a wall of hay stacked strangely neat, he found a locked door. After breaking the old padlock, he stepped into a hidden workshop frozen in time. Tools hung perfectly in place. Blueprints covered the walls, and in the center of the room sat a half-built machine covered with a canvas sheet. When Dean pulled the cloth away, he felt his breath catch. The machine was beautifully made, every coil and wire placed with purpose. It was the converter from the journal, the device Virgil had spent decades building. And suddenly Dean realized this farm wasn't a joke, it was a responsibility, a calling, a chance to finish something extraordinary. As days turned into weeks, Dean built a new routine. In the mornings, he worked at a hardware store in town, stocking shelves and unloading boxes, simple work but grounding. In the afternoons and late into the night, he lived inside Virgil's workshop. He studied every page of the journals, every sketch, every formula scribbled in margins. The converter wasn't nonsense. It was engineering ahead of its time. With each discovery, Dean felt closer to Virgil, like the man was guiding him through the pages. But then one afternoon, while cleaning a cabinet, he found a hidden metal box sealed with a combination lock. Inside were letters, dozens of them. The first was from Virgil to a university professor asking for help reviewing his ideas. And for a while, the responses were warm, supportive, hopeful. But then the tone changed. The university claimed Virgil's ideas were similar to internal research. Then came patent rejections, then silence. And on the last letter in Virgil's own shaky handwriting were 3 words. They stole it! Dean felt anger rise like fire. The university had taken Virgil's ideas, claimed them, and built a successful research program on top of them. Virgil died thinking he had failed, not knowing that his invention had been taken by people with power and resources he never had. Dean knew what it felt like to be dismissed, ignored, overlooked. And in that moment, standing in the quiet barn, he made a promise. He would finish the converter, and he would make sure the world knew the truth about Virgil. Finishing the device wasn't easy. Many parts were missing, and buying new components cost money Dean didn't have. But little by little, with his employee discount from the hardware store and help from a neighbor named Phillies who remembered Virgil with kindness, Dean collected what he needed. He organized the workshop, cleaned each tool, labeled wires, and studied blueprints until he could recite them from memory, and slowly the machine came together. One cold morning after weeks of preparation, he finally felt ready. With trembling hands, he flipped the main switch. The converter hummed softly, then louder, coils spinning with a warm, golden glow. Numbers danced across the gauges, stable, powerful, promising. It worked. It actually worked. Dean stood frozen, tears gathering as he watched the invention come alive. All those years, Virgil worked alone. All the ridicule, all the silence, all the rejection, and the machine worked exactly as he always believed it would. But success raised a new question. What now? Showing the world meant triggering a fight with the university that stole everything. Staying silent meant letting Virgil remain forgotten. And Dean had decided a long time ago he would not let this man die twice, once in body and once in memory. Dean reached out to the professor who once worked with Virgil, Dr. Constance Waverly. When she answered, her voice was older, tired, carrying years of guilt. She confessed everything, how she admired Virgil's talent, how her department head saw money in his work, how she was pressured to hand over his ideas, how she stayed silent when Virgil begged for help. She cried as she spoke. And when Dean told her the converter worked, she offered to help expose the truth. Together with a sharp local attorney named Lawrence and a national group that protected small inventors, they built a case. Documents, letters, memos, patent timelines, proof that the university had stolen Virgil's work. They decided to reveal everything through a public demonstration on the farm. Dean cleaned the workshop, set up chairs, mounted Virgil's blueprints on the walls. The town heard about it, then the news stations, then the internet. On the day of the demonstration, more than 150 people filled the yard, including Dean's daughter, Bryn, who arrived quietly, guilt on her face for years of distance. At 2:15, the professor herself stepped out of a car. It was time. The crowd fell silent as Dean powered on the converter. The machine came alive with a steady hum, the copper coils glowing as electricity flowed through them. Light bulbs flickered on. A heater warmed. A refrigerator buzzed. A power tool roared to life. People gasped as they watched the machine give more energy than it took, something no commercial device could do. When the test ended, applause erupted. And then Lawrence stepped forward, explaining how the university had stolen Virgil's work. Dr. Waverly stood before the crowd and admitted everything. Her voice shook, but her honesty was powerful. People listened, stunned, angry, heartbroken for a man they once ignored. Neighbors shared small memories of Virgil fixing engines, offering help, keeping to himself. They realized they had overlooked a quiet genius living among them. By the end of the event, the entire town stood behind Dean. They wanted justice. They wanted the truth told. And for the first time in a long time, Dean felt his daughter's hand slip into his, a silent thank you, a sign that something broken between them might finally be healing. Pressure grew quickly. News outlets told the story nationwide. The university released statements full of excuses and vague language, but they couldn't escape the truth. Too many people were watching, too much evidence existed. Dean, Bryn, Lawrence, and Dr. Waverly attended a final negotiation meeting at a neutral conference center. Hours passed. Arguments rose, then fell. But in the end, the university yielded. They agreed to publicly name Virgil Caswick as the original inventor. They agreed to create a scholarship in his name for students from small rural towns. They agreed to protect the converter and never claim ownership over Dean's work. When Dean returned to the farm that night, snow falling softly around him, he whispered toward the workshop, "We did it, Virgil. They can't erase you anymore." Weeks later, the university held a ceremony naming a new lab after Virgil. Students and engineers visited the farm. People donated funds to keep the workshop running. A young girl received the first scholarship, and Bryn, seeing how much this journey changed her father, left her old stressful job to help run a foundation supporting small inventors like Virgil. The farm, once seen as worthless, became a place of hope, inspiration, and justice. The following spring, Dean stood in the workshop doorway as green fields swayed under morning sunlight. The converter hummed steadily behind him, glowing with the life and legacy of a man who once worked in silence. Bronze plaques honoring Virgil hung on the walls. Visitors came often now, students, dreamers, skeptics, farmers, people hungry to learn how one forgotten man changed everything. Dean wrote one last line in Virgil's journal. "Your work mattered. Your life mattered." And now the world will never forget. When he closed the journal, Bryn walked into the workshop smiling, coffee in hand, finally proud of the man she once feared was lost to loneliness. They stepped outside together, watching birds rise over the fields, both knowing their lives were changed forever by a stranger's hidden brilliance. And as Dean looked at the farm, he understood something simple and powerful. A $5 raffle ticket had given him a purpose he didn't know he needed. A fight worth fighting, a daughter worth reconnecting with, and a legacy worth protecting. If you felt this story, if it moved something inside you, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so more people can hear stories that deserve to be remembered. And before you go, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now?